Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our Narcolepsy Nerd Alert about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations. We're so excited to be here today. I'm Julie Flygare. I'm president and CEO of Project Sleep in Los Angeles, and we have some incredible guests with us today. In addition to Lauren, our programs manager extraordinaire. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. Great to see everybody.
So we have Chesea with us. Hi, Chesea.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm super honored.
Chesea is a world traveler who enjoys creating things with her hands. She is diagnosed with type 1 narcolepsy in 2010 while living in Japan. As a speaker with Project Sleep's Rising Voices program, Chesea raises awareness to combat misperceptions about narcolepsy and let others know they're not alone. And next we have Kristyn. Hey, Kristyn.
Hi.
Kristyn is a storyteller and news producer in Houston, Texas. She was diagnosed with type 2 narcolepsy without cataplexy at age 24 after living with symptoms for many years. She's a graduate of Hampton University and a Rising Voices speaker. Kristyn works daily to make sure unrepresented voices are heard and their stories are shared. And we're excited to hear a little bit about your story too. So Connor, hey Connor.
How's it going?
Pretty good. So Connor Baker is a CDU nurse. What's a CDU nurse?
Stands for Central Decision Unit. It's kind of like a in between the emergency room and inpatient. Trying to figure out whether or not you're going to be inpatient or you can go home.
All right. So you're a CD nurse working at Rush Copley Medical Center in Aurora, Illinois. He was diagnosed with type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy at 20 years old. Connor shares his story as a Rising Voices speaker to spread awareness and end stigmas surrounding narcolepsy. So we're just really excited to have our amazing guest panel here to talk about sleep paralysis and hallucinations. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the slides. See if I can do this correctly. Oops. Get this going. All right. Lauren, you want to do some reminders?
Yeah, so before we get started today, just a little housekeeping. As you're tuning in, if you'd like to share your state or country that you're tuning in from, we love to see where everybody's joining us from. Please like, comment, and share the video as much as you want to, because then Facebook will show it to more people. We can reach even more of our community. Just remember that the video is being recorded and the comments are going to be public and will be shared later. So anything that you say is going to stay with the video. Please do submit any questions that you have for our guests in the comments. And just remember that we are doing these broadcasts for educational purposes, and we can't give any medical advice. So if anything comes up for you that sparks questions about your own condition or medication or anything like that, that you please bring that to your healthcare providers. After the broadcast today, we're going to work on building a toolkit together that's going to have even more information and resources, as well as insights from our guests and from our audience. So really excited for this conversation. Just a special note about today, since we are talking about sleep paralysis and hallucinations, some of the stuff we're talking about might be disturbing or scary. So just to keep that in mind. All right.
Thank you, Lauren. Oops. Get these slides moving. Our special guest, we already went over. So sleep paralysis, we're going to start with just going over the basic definitions of these terms and then getting into some example stories. So sleep paralysis is defined as the inability to move or speak for a few seconds or minutes when falling asleep or waking up. So this can include a sense of restricted breathing or crushing weight on the chest. And it's often accompanied by hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. Why such a long word for hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations? Such a long word. Well, what are they? They are visual, auditory, or tactile. So seeing things, hearing things, or feeling things, or other sensory hallucinations upon falling asleep or waking up. Can happen while feeling awake. and we'll definitely talk about that. Are we awake? Are we asleep? What's happening? It's often frightening and confusing, and common themes include intruders, incubus, unusual body experiences. This can also include, floating or flying or out of body experiences as well. Had a few of those. And I guess I'll just mention here really quickly, when we think about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations and the difference between what someone might think of as a regular dream or nightmare. I know for me, like I had experienced plenty of dreams or, scary dreams when I was growing up, but my first hypnagogic hallucination and sleep paralysis experience felt really different because it felt like it was happening in the very space where I was. And I think that's kind of a good distinguisher between talking about just dreams or nightmares versus these experiences, which is that they're often there exactly where you are, where you're sleeping or napping or, struggling to stay awake. And the things are in that space as opposed to going off in your dream to, other places, flying above buildings or thinking you're at the mall or, stuff like that. Those are where you are kind of like in a dream experience going other places. So before we get to some of the other history though, I just we have some incredible speakers. We were joking before we came on here that perhaps this is like the Oscars of hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis. Our guests have very memorable experiences that have really stuck with us. So if they would be willing to share a little bit of those, let's see. Anyone want to go first? Connor?
All right, yeah, that'll work. So I can go first. So I've had multiple, throughout the years that I've had narcolepsy, and before I was diagnosed with it, I just thought they were really, really, really bad dreams. But one of the ones that sticks with me the most was right around the time I actually got my diagnosis. She's currently my wife, but that back then we were still dating.
Wasn't it like your first date?
It was pretty close. It was right. It was I had just moved back up to Illinois, so we were still trying to figure out the whole narcolepsy thing. Not really sure how it had an impact on the relationship, kind of thing. So she got a full dose of what all the sides of it could be that night. That's for sure. She had actually dropped me off from a date. I think we had went to go see a movie or something that night. And I was pretty tired afterwards. I remember sitting down, and for a lot of these like hallucinations for me, they tend to happen as I'm falling asleep rather than waking up. And I can always tell it's going to be rough because I get almost like you go over a hill too fast. You almost like lose your stomach kind of feeling. So I, sat down, and this wasn't my first rodeo, but it was definitely a more memorable one. As I'm sitting there on the couch, I had the feeling of my stomach leaving me. And I remember feeling my head slump forward, and not really being able to move, which initially, startled me. But quickly afterwards, I started hearing feet running through the house, like bare feet on a wooden floor, which was weird because I was the only person in the house at the time. It was pretty late at night. I'd say probably close to 10, 11 o'clock. Only one in the house, but I kept hearing these feet running across the floor. I, of course, tried to move, get up. Nothing was responding. Nothing was working. So I am convinced that there's someone in the house with me. Those feet quickly run into the kitchen. All this is happening behind my head. I can't see anything. I can only hear the feet running around. The feet quickly turn into things breaking and doors slamming in the kitchen. And I'm trying to call out, get up, grab my phone, just anything, because I can see everything going on around me, but like I said, I can't move. Just stuck there on the couch. Well, I have a moment of peace, if I want to call it that, because the banging and the breaking and the feet running around stopped for a moment. But what winds up happening after all the running around in the house, there's this voice of like this, almost like sounds like a little girl that starts laughing behind my head. Of course, I'm trying to turn to the side and look, trying to move, but I can't, I can't even call out for help at this point. And it feels like that goes on for forever, a long time. And the laughing ends up turning into I don't know if anyone has seen any of the like horror movies where you've got the like exorcism type of thing, and they start talking in different language real fast and like almost like multiple voices at once kind of thing. Can't understand a word that it's saying, but that little girl is no longer laughing. She's doing that behind my head, and that goes on what feels like forever. So at some point during this, thankfully, I don't remember doing this, but I was able to call my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. And she said that she heard me just muttering like help, help, help over and over and over again. And she had managed to get all the way home, which was about half an hour away from where I was, and all the way back to me during this entire time. So that episode went on for at least an hour, thinking back on it now, where I had the mysterious little girl whispering and laughing and running around through the house, and me stuck on the couch.
So scary. Has she ever returned, or?
To that extreme extent, no. But the running around, the feet run around on the floor, that happens on a fairly regular basis, and it gives me a nice little flashback every time it happens.
Yeah. I feel like they're often, why are they so noisy? Why are they always banging around in the kitchen? And
well, they got to let you know they're there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Connor. Let's see, Kristyn, did you want to share a little bit about your hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis experiences?
Yeah, so this one isn't as scary, although I have had some like terrifying ones. But I think this was when I was just trying to get diagnosed. So I didn't have a diagnosis yet, but I was pretty convinced that I had narcolepsy. And I started a new job, and I'm a news producer, so I worked overnight, which means that I came to work at like 10 o'clock at night, and I got off at 7 or 8 in the morning. And so most people would be very sleepy. I was trying to figure out if I had narcolepsy. I was extra sleepy at that time. And everyone in the office had already begun talking about the girl that's falling asleep all the time. I didn't know this yet, but they had been telling my managers, like, she sleeps when no one's here. And so I didn't realize that I was falling asleep. I knew I was falling asleep. I didn't realize I was falling asleep as much as I did. And so I later learned that we had really high ceilings. Kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been to an airport. One time I was like in LaGuardia and the ceilings were super high and there were birds flying around in LaGuardia. And I thought birds had gotten into the newsroom and were flying around. And I kept being like, yo, like that bird, it's like 3 a.m. I'm like, y'all don't see that bird like flying around here? And I'm sure they thought there's something wrong with this girl. She sleeps, she's new, she's seeing birds. And I was just convinced that I could see the bird, but nobody else could see the bird. And I didn't think anything was wrong with me. I was just like, the bird is really fast and it's really good at flying. And I'm the only person who could see it. And so that went on for like a couple of days. Like I would see the bird flying by. And I thought that it was getting in and getting out somehow. I later learned through Project Sleep, because my sleep specialist did not explain what hallucinations were. That was a hallucination. And that's what helped me to realize that there are times when I don't realize that I'm falling asleep, that I am going to sleep in public. And as Julie was saying, like everything around me looks exactly the same. And so sometimes when I'm at work, something will happen and it'll be a normal day. Like I think I'm writing a story. And then like, I don't like 2 knives will go across this computer screen and they won't like hit me or anything, and then I'll be like, oh, there are not knives in here. Kristyn, you are asleep. And that's how I realized that, oh, I should get up and like move around because I've been sleeping. And then when I sometimes, especially if I'm starting to have sleep paralysis in that moment, I'm trying to like wake myself up. I look at the screen and like I've written just gibberish. And that's how I realized that I have been asleep, but they're not always scary. The knives is scary, but they're not always scary. They're just abnormal, but only a little bit, to the point where you're not really sure if it's real. And if I'm sitting straight up and at my desk, I would not know if it was not abnormal to me that a bird would get into a place with high ceilings. So I just thought that was real, but clearly I was asleep.
Yeah, the very real nature of these is incredible. I like to describe to people that I just don't know if anything that happened around my sleep time was real or not. I pretty much assume it's not real because that seems like the first best guess. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Chelsea, you want to share a little bit about your experience?
Sure. Like you had said about not being a stranger to nightmares or crazy dreams or whatever, I've been plagued with like horrific nightmares for as long as I can remember. My mom said I was probably like 2 or 3 when they started. And so I've just dealt with them my whole life. And they, during emotional times, like if I was going through a breakup or was stressed out about school or something, they usually were worse. And that's true with every symptom of narcolepsy. Now I've learned that if I'm stressed or going through a hard time, it makes everything worse, including my hallucinations. But the first hallucinations I can actually remember was right before I got diagnosed, like you guys, living in Japan. And
why were you in Japan?
Oh, so my husband was in the Air Force. He's retired now. He was active duty Air Force and we were stationed in Okinawa and I loved it there. And I worked with a lot of local nationals and hung out with a lot of local nationals. So I got a real good experience and sense of the culture, which I'm sure also like influenced the way I perceived these hallucinations, because I literally thought that they were hauntings. Like I didn't think I was dreaming. I thought they were for sure real and I was being haunted by spirits or something, because that's just part of their culture, is they believe that you're like surrounded, by spirits and stuff, not necessarily hauntings all the time. But we were living on base, which also there was a lot of like battles during World War II in Okinawa, and especially in certain areas of the base. So there's a lot of talk about different houses that were haunted. So I'm sure that had a play on it as well. But one night I was asleep, and when I have a hallucination, I have them both falling asleep and waking up. I get them on both ends, unfortunately, and they're almost always coupled with sleep paralysis. So kind of like what Connor was explaining, like he couldn't move, he couldn't cry out, he couldn't do anything. That's what I experienced as well. And the first one, like it didn't seem horrific at first because I was laying down and no, that's not true. It was, I thought I heard someone breaking in to our house. And like I thought I heard glass breaking and someone like shuffling through things, throwing things around. Yeah, they're really noisy, always. And then like coming up the stairs. I could hear someone coming up the stairs to our bedroom. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, someone's breaking into the house. Someone's breaking into the house. Like, why is my husband not waking up? And I can't move or like scream out or call out to him or anything. And then all of a sudden, like it got quiet. And my husband and I were like I was facing the wall, he was facing me as we were sleeping on our sides. And that's how we fell asleep. And I could feel him stroking my hair, the back of my hair, and like probably to calm me because he could sense my distress. And I thought, oh my God, that is so sweet. That is so nice. And so I rolled over to like thank him, and he was dead asleep facing the other direction. But I had physically felt somebody stroking my hair. And I thought like, this is unbelievable. So naturally it was a ghost, right? That was stroking my hair. So this stuff happened all the time. I would feel things like snap me and I would wake up. I could still feel the stinging on my skin. I had instances and some of them were okay and kind of like fun. Like my dad, when we were kids, used to pull our toe, especially our big toe. He'd come up and pull on it to wake us up. Not hard, just like a little tug on our toe. And I've had that so many times. Like I can feel the sensation of him tugging on my toe. And I'm thinking, what's my dad doing in my bed in Japan as I'm an adult and I'm married? Away, and then you wake up, nope, not there. And yeah, and so I remember like telling my husband this, and he's thinking, like, she's losing her mind, what's going on? I'm telling the people I work with, and they're like, oh, your house is haunted. You should do this, you should do that to get rid of these spirits, Yeah. And then when I finally went to a doctor to talk to a doctor, which I went because I started experiencing cataplexy, which is what led me to see him, he's like, well, tell me about your sleep. And I'm like, you don't want to know about my sleep. And I thought for sure if I told him, he'd think I was crazy because I knew they were real experiences. Like I had real sensations with them. They were so different than dreams.
And what did he say? Didn't he say something about?
Oh, well, he said, so when I got diagnosed, so I ended up having to go off base to a Japanese doctor and a Japanese clinic. Not a military one, to get the actual diagnosis because they didn't have the ability to do it on base. And actually, like ironically, narcolepsy is much more prevalent in Japanese than it is in Americans. They carry the HLA at a higher percentage, so there's much more people like per capita in Japan with narcolepsy than in America. So I guess I was in a great place for it, to get diagnosed. But the doctor asked me, he said, he's this older, very traditional Japanese doctor. And he said, what did you think was happening to you? And I said, I thought my house was haunted. And he said, old way of thinking. It was like, okay, touche,
Yeah. I'm curious from Kristyn and Connor too. Did you guys think of these as like a medical problem that you address with a doctor, or more of like I don't know what's happening? Did you guys bring them up right away to doctors?
I never did. And I can remember an early one. If honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, that actually shifts my like timetable of when I thought I may have like developed narcolepsy. I was a kid. And I thought maybe like 14 is when, because I can remember falling asleep in class, but I was like 11. And I remember I was sleeping in my mom's room because the night before I had felt really sick in the night. And so I slept in my mom's bed that night. And then I remember and I can draw it, like it's so vivid, which is why I believe it was my first one. And now that I think back, I'm like, Kristyn, why did you think this was real? It was like a snake, but it had like no eyes, so it kind of looks like a worm. I was a kid, so it was like a very childlike version of something. And it came up and bit my hand. And like up to this part of my hand was in its mouth. And I woke up screaming and it still hurt. Like I can still feel it now, but I could feel it then. And it's so crazy that you said that I ever talked to a doctor, because the very next night I had a seizure. It was just completely unrelated. I was taking like medication as a child. And so my mom was saying, like, 3 nights in a row I slept in her room, because the first night I didn't feel well. The second night I had the like bite thing and woke her up and she was so afraid. And then the third night I had a seizure. And I know I definitely didn't tell the doctor like, oh, by the way, the night before a snake bit me in a dream. I just thought that I was having a bad dream. And I honestly thought that like the bad dream was like some sort of sign that I needed to stay in my mom's room. She would not have known that I had the seizure if I stayed in my own room the night before. So, but I was 11. So maybe that was my first hallucination. And I definitely didn't tell the doctor about it.
Wow.
It changed my timetable a lot too, actually, as I was preparing to do this Nerd Alert. I was thinking about the dreams I've had and different things I've experienced. And I'm like, you know what? I can recall having auditory hallucinations years before. So, but I didn't have cataplexy or any of the other stuff. And it definitely got much worse, but it definitely shifted my timetable too. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, to be honest, the certain things that happen pretty regularly with me still, like call him the shadow man. This someone that I see out of the corner of my eye, or down at the end of a hallway whenever I'm just like at the hospital. It's really freaky because I work nights, so my heart jumps a little bit because I'm thinking someone's out of their room that shouldn't be moving around. But the shadow man, I'd say I'd probably had been seeing since I was like 8 years old. I was right around 8 years old. It was probably the first time. But like everyone else was saying, I didn't necessarily have all the other symptoms with it. I just kind of attribute it to really bad dreams. And then when they got really bad to where like I knew that I was awake. Like it wasn't I'm asleep and I'm dreaming, or like I could pass it off as a dream. I was 100% certain that I was awake when these things were happening. I was living in Louisiana, and I'm a little, I wouldn't say superstitious, but I was thinking like some voodoo stuff was going on down there. So I didn't want to sound crazy to anybody. But when it followed me back up here to Illinois, I kind of had an idea that like, I'm kind of meeting all the, did the good old WebMD self-diagnosis thing. And I kind of was like, I might have narcolepsy. And that's when I started like reading about the sleep paralysis and the hypnagogic hallucinations. So I still don't want to talk, being a nurse, it's like, it's fine to talk about these things, but even still, like to this day, it's like not something that like I would bring up to the doctor just because it's, you're scared of what someone might think kind of thing. But, like Chelsea said, it's an old way of thinking.
Yeah. But I do think there are doctors who aren't familiar with it. And if we don't necessarily use the correct terminology or describe it just right, that they would think that, we're having hallucinations that don't have anything to do with the change in wakefulness, and that we're just having an actual hallucination, because they seem like that, and the change in wakefulness is, God, it's so slight. It's so hard to describe and get a grasp of it, because when I lived in New York, I had gone through a bad breakup and I was having horrific nightmares. they were really impacting my life. Like there were times where I would call into work because I had to go into work late because I had a night of nightmares and I couldn't function.
You mean the hypnagogic hallucinations or nightmares?
They were not hallucinations. They were nightmares. They were like just horrific nightmares. Usually they involved me being sacrificed, like literally burned at the stake. Like imprisoned in jail and chained up and beaten to death. And I mean, really horrible, like violent, just horrific, like dreams, nightmares. And I would wake up and I would just be like, I felt like I lived through them, but not like I didn't have any physical sensations or sounds or anything like that, but I was just exhausted, you know? And I was shaken from them. So I started seeing I looked it up and I wanted to specifically see a Jungian psychoanalyst who did dream therapy. And I don't even know what they would call that now because terminology changes all the time. But I found this woman who she specialized in that. And I saw her and went to her for, a couple of years, probably year and a half or so. And she helped me tremendously. And in the beginning, she suggested, because I liked to paint and create things, she suggested that I started painting these horrific images in my dreams.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we're going to get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. So I did. So, yeah. Do you want me to stop there and we can talk about that?
Yeah. We'll get to that in a little bit. Why don't we go ahead and share a little bit more of the slides that we have. Let's see if I can do this correctly again. Share, present. So just a little bit of history too, because, I think for each of us that has experienced something like this, it feels like so out there, but people have been experiencing hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis for a very long time. It's been described for at least 2,000 years and across many different cultures. And it's not just people with narcolepsy that experience this as well. Different studies will say different numbers from what I could tell, somewhere between 8% to 30% of the general population has experienced things like this at some point in their life. For people with narcolepsy, it's just much more consistent that we experience these. But even the word nightmare that we now think of is kind of like what Chelsea was describing. It's from the Old English word marde, I guess, a malevolent figure who lies upon and immobilizes or suffocates sleepers. So really even that term first was really describing a hypnagogic sleep paralysis, kind of like that feeling like someone's on your chest. And that, there's been many interpretations. We love as humans to interpret and find meaning from things. And so there's certainly, tons of dream interpretation throughout time, but also for these specific experiences, thought of as supernatural causes, witches, old hags, ghosts, demons, vampires, aliens. We have a great article on Project Sleep's website that goes through some of these different examples and how they can be hypnagogic hallucinations. So I think we'll go ahead and put that article into the Facebook comments as well, so you guys can check out that. And here's some really cool artwork that has been done. I think Fuseli's in the middle here. This is a really famous painting of like an incubus figure lying on a woman's chest. Have you guys experienced ones where, you really feel like you can't breathe, or that I know my first hallucination is a man coming into my room, and I remember him reaching out towards my neck. But I don't think he was like crushing on my neck. I just felt like he was about to strangle me. But have you guys had that sensation of like not being able to breathe, or that something's on your chest?
Absolutely. A lot, actually. And I had started having that in my like mid-teens. And I had that a lot when I was going through a stressful period in high school. And I had it, and it felt like there was this like darkness and weight on top of me that was so heavy, and it was super hard to breathe. And I couldn't scream out. I couldn't do anything. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
know that for me, there was I mean, this doesn't happen as much anymore, thankfully, but the times whenever I have those, there was a point in time where it was nightly, and it was so bad that me and my wife, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to share a room together because I have more of I don't have the flight instinct where I wake up, just scared or scream or anything like that. I typically lash out whenever I have the where someone's holding me down or trapping me kind of thing. I would wake up and I'd wake up swinging. Or there's we laugh about it now. It's not really funny, but we laugh about it now. But back when I was it was closer to whenever I used to do MMA and boxing and stuff, and it was closer to whenever I had just stopped. There were times where I'd come out of one of those and I'd immediately put my wife in a submission hold, just out of pure instinct reflex because of how how realistic the being restrained felt. I was 100% for sure that I was being attacked, to the point where like I said, just instinct took over whenever I would come out of it.
Wow. And wasn't she also a fighter though? She had some fight in her?
Yeah, she's she's hit, bit. Yeah, she's gotten her punches in too.
Good.
But yeah, no, she's made sure I snapped out of it pretty quick.
Oh, good.
There's actually a funny, not fun, I guess, like I said, funny but not funny. This was down in Louisiana. We were visiting, and down south, everyone's all about their guns and everything, right? And the people that we were staying with, good friends of mine, the dad slept with a gun under his pillow on the living room floor, had a bad back, and that's just what he did. Old Cajun guy. And I had one of these episodes while I was there. Wife, I did what I normally do, woke up, lashed out. Wife woke up screaming because I was lashing out, not at her, but in the general vicinity that she was in, essentially. And I had stayed with him a few times in the past before I knew that I had narcolepsy, and he busted in the room, gun drawn, ready to take care of whoever was bothering us. But then whenever he saw what was going on, he was like, "Oh, it's just Connor. It's fine. This is a normal thing for him."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very, yeah, it gets very very real, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we have some more recent cultural examples here. Well, they might not necessarily be direct depictions of sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, but they do have very strong parallels to the experience. And thank you, Lauren, for putting this slide together and knowing more about culture than I do to put these together. But the top image here is from Stranger Things. And it's when all right, I'm going to try to say it. Vecna would have victims he would immobilize when he attacks them in an altered dimension. And here's a picture of him attacking Max. And if you watch the clip, we've watched the full clip together, and it's feels very much like a hypnagogic hallucination, and very, very real. Of course, it is in a different kind of alter universe, And then, of course, we see the character actually come out of this paralysis in their real world and kind of drop to the ground. And so it's a really neat clip. If you haven't seen it, maybe we can put those in the Facebook as well. And then the Harry Potter on the left here and the Order of Phoenix. It's a Dementor attacking Harry, and he's frozen and can't breathe and sucking at his soul. I think this one, the one that, and Lauren's captured this perfect screenshot here of it, is when the demon like breathes on Harry and you see this mist come out of the mouth. Because I feel like definitely we've had speakers talk about being able to smell the breath of like a demon or a witch sitting on them. Ugh. I don't think I've experienced that myself, but that really seemed to resonate with some of what I've heard other people talk about.
I've felt the breath. I've not smelled it, but I've felt breath on my ear when something was a hallucination of something speaking to me, and I could feel the breath on the side of my face and my ear as it was talking.
Wow. And then Billie Eilish has this, she has a whole album that's a lot about sleep, and this song Bury a Friend has, it seems like, a lot about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations. And Billie Eilish has talked about, even on social media, having some sleep paralysis. I think she talks about usually in the sleep paralysis experience, and even how this whole album that she put together was really influenced by her dream and nightmare experiences. And so that's another really cool reference. I think some people had messaged me and say, do you think Billie Eilish has narcolepsy? You know, she has a lot of sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, possibly. And I looked into a little bit, and she actually does talk about having Tourette's syndrome publicly. And I looked at some literature there, and they have very disrupted sleep sometimes with Tourette's. And so that could possibly be a cause for her hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis. But she definitely has found artistic inspiration from it. Why do these happen? On a scientific level, there seems to be a temporary discordance in rapid eye movement sleep. So usually in normal REM sleep, muscle atonia. So that's like muscle paralysis starts before sleep onset. And okay, sorry, back up. Usually when we enter dream sleep, we become paralyzed, so we don't act out our dreams, because that would be quite dangerous. And so it's a very normal mechanism to be paralyzed in our dreams when we're having dream sleep. But when this is happening, that same very normal sleep paralysis is extending beyond the dream period into, sort of this middle ground between being dreaming and asleep and being awake. And it's also linked to hypocretin or orexin deficiency. Upon waking, orexin producing cells turn on serotonin producing cells to reverse muscle atonia. So, this being kind of disrupted seems to make sense that, it very much is related to having narcolepsy, but also for people that don't have narcolepsy, I believe when people are sleep deprived or stressed, they will enter REM sleep more rapidly, and kind of their sleep gets out of sync, and REM can kind of intrude at the beginning of their sleep or more at the end, and is likely also why people without narcolepsy experience these as well. And we'll go into more depth about the science in the toolkit, but there is some nice research that talks about why this is happening. So strategies for managing it, I think it's an important element. Well, maybe we should stop here before we get to strategies and see if Lauren, is there any comments from the audience?
Oh yeah, so many comments, and people tuned in from all over the United States and Portugal and Canada, which is really exciting to see. So a lot of people just commenting, relating to the experiences that folks have shared, just saying, how scary this is, and also how the ones that aren't so scary, like I think Taylor mentioned bugs. that she sees sometimes are just tough to distinguish from reality. And it's, hard to talk with your doctors about, you're afraid of being called crazy. And somebody was even also talking about having been misdiagnosed with a psychiatric disorder because of talking about, being so scared of the shadow man. So those are really tough experiences that people are having commonly. And then I think that's as far as we've gotten for the most part in the comments. And we just it's awesome to see so many people tuned in and with us.
Yeah, so strategies for dealing with this. I think it's always really interesting to try to think about how can we make them better. It's tough, and there are no treatments that are specifically like FDA approved to improve these. I'd say that some treatments might improve them, but they're certainly not FDA approved and indicated for reducing these things. So, in general, some strategies could be, anxiety management, sleep routine, keeping a regular schedule, looking for patterns and emotional preparedness, environmental triggers, even pets' behaviors. So I know for myself and many people talk about like getting their sense of reality from a pet and realizing what could be happening or not happening based on that, and looking for creative outlets. One strategy that I've figured out, I guess it would be kind of like a emotional preparedness, is that I've realized that if I'm questioning whether I'm awake or not, like, is this really happening? If I can think that in my head as I'm having one of these, then I try to remember that means it's probably not happening. Because once I actually am awake fully, I'm always like, oh, this is reality. Like, I don't really, like, once I'm really awake, I'm like, oh yeah, this is awake. When I'm awake, it's not a question about whether I'm awake. And so I think sometimes when I'm able to realize I'm questioning whether I'm awake, I probably am not.
I have a question. Does that work for you?
Sometimes, a little bit.
That's awesome. I need to get there. I feel the same way. Like, if I am questioning whether this is reality or not, 100% it's not reality. Like, I never question if this is reality when I'm awake and alert, but for whatever reason, I don't have the wherewithal to realize that if I'm questioning it, it's a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and even the transition, we talked a little bit about that, but that transition between a hallucination and then being in your environment, I had like a mini jar of mace, and after one hypnagogic hallucination, living in an apartment, I started walking around the apartment with the mace looking for the burglar, and like 10 or 15 minutes go by and I'm walking around, in reality, looking for the burglar, and then remembering I've been diagnosed with narcolepsy now at that point for like 8 years. Like, oh, the intruder. Oh, geez, wow. Probably the thing that happens to me all the time. But how do I end up with the mace walking around the apartment for, 10 or 15 minutes before remembering that, like, duh, like it wasn't real. So it certainly, I don't know if I really have any exact solution. How about you guys? Do you have any strategies for coping with these?
Go ahead.
Oh, I just know, I don't know if it's a coping strategy or if it's just, I know that if I'm really tired or exhausted, I am going to have more hallucinations. I'm going to be more prone to having sleep paralysis. So like if it's Wednesday and I've had this every night this week, I'm like, okay, I need to do something different. Even if I'm going to sleep on my normal time, I need to maybe try to get some more sleep and try not to look at my phone, try to see what is like emotionally triggering me. If I'm like super stressed about something, because it's not going to get any better, it's only going to get worse. And then knowing that I have the chance of having sleep paralysis, which scares me so much, I will not sleep, which will then make me more tired. So it's kind of a coping strategy that happens after the fact. I don't have a way to like stop them, but I feel like I have a way to help slow them down, is to just try to be as rested as possible if I'm noticing that like they're happening every night.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. I have felt the same way. And I know that once I start having them, I'm more likely to have more of them. And then it's terrifying. And so you don't want to sleep. And being terrified and not sleeping actually increases the likelihood of it happening more. And yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
I know for me, for me, it's stuff that it's kind of funny, but it's stuff that, they tell everybody, oh, do X, Y, and Z to, sleep better. Don't look at your phone for a couple hours, turn the TV off like an hour or two before bed. Don't make sure you don't eat for a couple hours before you go to sleep. Things doing like you're like just doing like actually being on top of those things tend to help somewhat. It's not necessarily a guarantee, but it does help somewhat, at least for me. As for when they happen though, like coping strategies, we found out that we actually found this out through a smart aleck comment that I made to my wife one night whenever I was coming out of one of them. I woke up screaming and like super, just it was a bad moment, and I was still half asleep. I had taken my I had taken Xyrem to help me sleep that night, and it was still kind of working. I don't tend to have a filter when that's working and I wake up with that in my system. So she asked me, she's like, well, what can I do? Can I help you? I said, what are you going to do? You get scared of everything. So she's like, well, do you want me to get one of the dogs? I was like, yeah, get Bella. I know Bella will actually protect me. Bella's my little 50 pound like pit mix. And so that's kind of the go-to now is whenever I wake up from an episode, and it's a lot of the times it's kind of a cycle where I'll have one, I'll come back to for moments, and then I'll fall back into it. It just happens over and over and over again. It can happen for hours. But for some reason, whenever we get my little 50-pound pit in the bed with us, she kind of just like centers me, I guess, like grounds me to reality. Yeah, so that, I mean, that whenever it's happening, that's kind of the only thing. But I mean, I've done exactly the same thing you've done, Julie, where we actually just got back from vacation not too long ago. Forget where we went, but the night that we got back, door was open. I knew that I was awake, and I saw someone come out of the guest bedroom that was down directly across the hall. I saw them come out of the bedroom. I saw them stop in front of our door, and I saw them walk downstairs, and I heard them go into the basement. And I did the same thing you did. I grabbed my big 140 pound dog, and we went exploring the house for the made up intruder. And I was like, oh, wait a second. Wasn't actually real. It's okay. There's nobody here. Thankfully, the dog entertains my my momentary lapse of sanity. But yeah, it's just having the animals definitely help, doing those stereotypical sleep hygiene things, and not fighting it. Whenever you feel the need to sleep, for me especially, if I fight it, I'm guaranteed it's almost like a for sure I'm gonna have an episode if I try and fight the exhaustion and the sleep.
Mm-hmm. I also would say I do avoid scary movies and stuff. I feel like I don't need any more material for my hallucinations than it already has. So that's something I do as well. So Chelsea, you did mention a little bit about your art. We have some here, and do you want to share a little bit more? Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks. The dogs were barking, so you did it a second ago. So the therapist I saw in New York, she encouraged me to paint the scary things for my dreams. And I did that for a while and it helped some. And then she actually taught me lucid dreaming techniques, which helped tremendously. So I stopped painting them and just used the lucid dreaming techniques. But when I started having the hallucinations and the sleep paralysis, I guess because my level of sleep isn't deep enough to do lucid dreaming, I can't control those at all. I was back at this point where I had no mechanism or resource to use. And so I started painting the hallucinations. I went back to what I had done before, and it actually really started to help. So the one on the right is this beautiful, super pale lady with a cloak that had these metal gnashing teeth. And she would just and she kind of slobbered and was like, it was so scary. And she would just walk around my bed or kind of float around my bed with these. And so I painted her. And actually I painted her and I literally left her up in my bedroom for a while. And she's not scary to me at all anymore. And the one on the left, so the bottom image is, I also have this other woman who, well, I think she's a woman because she kind of was see-through and had no face. It was just blurred. And she was super scary. And so I thought, well, why don't I paint a face on her? Because then she won't be so scary anymore. So the version behind her is me giving a beautiful face to this terrifying hallucination I had. And then I blurred the faces of everyone else that was around her. And then now she's not so scary either because I made her look nice. And so I found that really just by using it in a creative way, I take ownership of it and I can manipulate it into the way I want to. And really it's mine to own. They're my hallucinations. They're coming from my brain to begin with. So it's really just owning what I already own and saying I'm going to let you be a little less scary. And in doing this, it made them not nearly as scary. And actually they became a lot more tactile, I think, than visual. So sometimes I will write a story about it or just talk about it. The bugs, I, for whatever reason, can't seem to draw the bugs. So I will write little short stories or something, or even horrible poetry about bugs. I've had many hallucinations that are kind of like the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where you're just literally covered with insects crawling all over you. So I'll write something about that, and just using it in some kind of creative outlet has seemed to help me.
Yeah. And just to put a nice little plug in there for our next Narcolepsy Nerd Alert is going to be February 28th on Rare Disease Day. And we are going to cover narcolepsy and art more broadly. So we're really excited about that because this, we got to look for the silver linings, as we say, and as best we can. Doesn't make these things go away, but all the creativity that comes from this is incredible. This woman on the right is just, looks so happy with her grindy metal teeth. Oh,
yeah, I couldn't quite capture how really horrible and disgusting those teeth were.
So we do have some poetry to share as well from Elizabeth Wilson. Elizabeth Wilson was diagnosed with narcolepsy type 1 when she was 38 years old, and she's also a graduate of the Rising Voices program and an award-winning poet. And she just actually published her first book called Window Panes. And she has actually recorded a quick video of her reading her poem for us that we're really excited to share today. So let me get that up really quick. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this okay.
Nightfall. I'm electric. A current ripples from my crown to my toes. The ossicles in my ears hum and whir. I'm restrained by a witch stronger than gravity. Her incantations press against my chest, crush my breath. This is a dream, I tell myself, a nightmare for the waking. If I can just move my pinky finger, I'll break her spell. I'll wake up. Night will fall around me.
So powerful. That just gave me chills. Oh, hold on a second. Let me try to get these slides back up.
Oh, can I say one other thing about the animal that has helped me is I have a little tiny dog and she sleeps next to me and we're almost always touching. She's against me in some way or I have my hand on her. And if I have a hallucination, she would be barking her full head off if someone was breaking into my house or was in the room. And knowing that she's not responding to anything is helpful and calms me enough to where either I can fall back asleep or wake up. And it has actually helped stop the loops of it. That's what I call them, just like Connor, to where it's like you just get stuck in this endless cycle of hallucination, sleep, kind of awake, hallucination, sleep, kind of awake, and it can last for hours otherwise.
I think this is a good place to stop and see what other people might be sharing, Lauren, on the chat.
Yeah, a lot of people are relating their experiences with their own hallucinations, which I think is really powerful, and just really appreciative of people for sharing that. And then just appreciating everything that everybody else that our guests are sharing, and Elizabeth's poetry. So that's what's going on in the chat.
All right, awesome. Well, it looks like we had a question here as well from Emma. Hey, Emma, you might get to this, but I'm wondering what support would look like from people around you without narcolepsy. So one thing I know, like for someone that like, is just like a friend that's not like sharing a bed with me, or I think the biggest way it would impact people around me or my relationships with friends or family would be in the time right after I would be coming out of something like this. So like during a nap or, waking up, but often I would have a lot of these during naps, giving me flexibility in the timing of a nap, is really helpful, because sometimes I feel like if I've had a weird issue with the sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucination during a nap, I might want to go for a walk after, or just sit and breathe for another 10 or 15 minutes before I rejoin my friends and family. I need like some more time to just like process and not just jump right back into life again. I'm not quite ready for it. And I think that, for me, that was often with coworkers, that I would have extra time, I would stay in my car and just like let myself breathe for 10 minutes before I go back into the office, and people might be asking you annoying questions or whatever, so that's some of the support I would look for. Do you guys have any other thoughts about support from friends and family?
If you don't have someone like in your household when you wake up that you can talk to, I used to, my mom would let me, even in like dead of night or super early hours of the morning, if I had come out of like a loop of them, if I was able to actually speak with someone, it would make me awake and more alert, to where it helped actually break the cycle. So I could just call her and just talk to her for a few minutes, and we would usually talk about something that had nothing to do with the hallucination or whatever, like some calming topic or mundane daily discussion. And then just for a couple minutes, and then I would be able to go back to sleep and feel more confident that I wasn't going to go right back into it.
I know for me, the not really, I guess, support for like the coming out of the hallucination, but kind of helping avoid, like, limit them coming on, I guess. With my work, I kind of have to make them aware of, what I have. That way, if I have a cataplexy episode at work, they don't call a code on me because they think that I'm going down, for the count. But I let them know what's going on, get accommodations so that, like, hey, whenever I say that I need to take my break, it's not really a oh, well, let's put it off for an hour kind of thing. It's like, hey, I gotta go, type of situation. And thankfully my job is like super flexible with it, and it's saying a lot with being like a hospital and taking people from the emergency room. But that just goes to show that, like, in a hospital setting, if they can accommodate someone who has the needs the help that I need, then you can get help pretty much any job situation. Just kind of not so basically just don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't be afraid to share it with whoever you need to share it with to get what you need, and just kind of advocate for yourself is the best way the only way that I can think of is, like, for support wise, because people generally, if you can get them to understand, people will generally be there for you to help you out. There's still good people left in the world.
That both of your responses were just so insightful. Kristyn, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I don't, if it's in the middle of the night, I wouldn't like call my parents. I don't want to like scare them. They would probably like drive over and like try to be with me. But I think just trying to like take some time, like as you were saying, like the 10 minutes before you could like return, just take some time and like calm myself and remind myself, even though in the moment I might forget, like, I might forget that I have narcolepsy, but be like, girl, like, you have narcolepsy. This is not normal for everyone, but it's your normal and you're gonna get through it.
Yeah. Oh, such brave people. We go through a lot, huh? We don't always talk about. So thank you guys so much for sharing that. Lauren, did you say there was another question in the chat?
Yeah, so Michelle was wondering if anybody's had experiences with objects in the room, like shape-shifting and turning into other objects. She said she has a smoke alarm that turns into like a UFO and flies around, and it's really scary.
Oh, absolutely. I have, yeah, if I have like a hamper or I have anything in the room can absolutely become like a person or a creature. Insect, yeah.
Mine's always the shadow. The shadow always turns into a moving figure that it doesn't really have any features, but it just kind of similar to your lady with the teeth. It'll come walk around the bed, walk down the hall. The shadow just kind of turns into a figure. So whether that's an object that's in the dark that I can't really see, or just the way the light's reflecting on something, so I guess that would be what would morph into something for me.
I know for me, one of the examples that I was more awake than asleep, I'd say, was I was doing yoga, and I probably shouldn't have gone to the yoga class. I was probably too tired, but I was getting more and more tired in the yoga class. And I remember looking at the floorboards, and it was like a wood floor that had knots in the wood. And one of the knots in the wood turned into a bird that came up 3D out of the wood and then flew. And it's just a quick second, but but then I was like, I did that jerky thing, and then I like kind of woke myself up again, so that's one example I'd say of like something turning into something else and moving. There's such a wide variety. I remember feeling like I was being electrically shocked, like someone had like plugged me into an electrical outlet. And I remember telling my doctor about that, and he was like, nah, I don't think that's a thing. And actually, in the book that we're going to reference at the end of this broadcast, I read about other people sharing that they felt like electric shock feelings. And it was so validating. And so just remember, we really are the experts of this experience. And most likely, other people have experienced similar things. There are a lot of common threads of our experiences. Maybe my doctor didn't know because no one else had, taken the time to bring up that, but we know. Muted myself. I'm going to pull up the slides again. And just, whoops, that's probably my email. Let me see. Share screen, poetry. What are you guys seeing?
It just says you started screen sharing. I wonder if it's because it's the end of the video
Oh,
from poetry.
I know. It just keeps happening. It's like kind of lost. The slides are lost.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'll explain something that I have some weird phenomenon, maybe not a phenomenon, like you have with the electric shock thing. It's this weird thing that happens. It's almost like a pressure in my head that often happens when I'm going into sleep paralysis. Like, when you're about to yawn or when you try and clear your ears to pop them, it's that kind of weird, like pressure in my head, like echoey sound that happens when I'm going to go into sleep paralysis for some reason. I don't know if anybody else gets that.
I have that as I'm waking up though. And I know that I've been like sleeping and like sleeping hard, but I didn't think that I was sleeping hard. Like I didn't realize I'd fall asleep across my bed when I'm like folding clothes. And as I'm waking up, it feels like I'm like fighting through something, and my head, it feels like
it is. It's like a fighting, like you're trying to like either something's trying to like come in or you're trying to get out or something.
And that's what makes me think that I had sleep paralysis and that I was like physically fighting my way out. So I feel like almost like sore or something, but it's like not my body, it's like my head.
Just in my head. Exactly.
So interesting. Well, if you guys can't get enough of this topic, I recommend this book, The Terror That Comes in the Night. It's a really interesting book about looking at people's experiences in Newfoundland in Canada in particular. And he does go through and describe a lot of different history of a lot of different cultures. And it was so validating to so many of my hypnagogic hallucination experience. And it brought more back to me, that I'd forgotten about. So reading this book, I think I just looked at it again. I hadn't looked at it in years. And all the notes I'd put in the sides, I think I probably read this before I wrote my own book, and a lot of the hallucinations that I end up including, I felt very validated by hearing other people's very similar experiences from this book. So definitely recommend that if you want to get more into this topic. And we do have this great article on our website about spooky nighttime visitors, paranormal, or parasomnias by Rebecca Fuoco. So check that out as well. And just in closing, just remind everyone that there are great organizations that have great resources, including Project Sleep, but also in America, the Hypersomnia Foundation, Narcolepsy Network, and Wake Up Narcolepsy have various great resources. And there are also international organizations around the world. We have a list of those on our World Narcolepsy Day page. And really interesting how different cultures interpret hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis as well. Chelsea talked about Japan, but some of our different speakers from different countries have talked about how things are interpreted in their countries. So a really interesting discussion there too. And just a quick reminder that we will have a toolkit coming out from this discussion. So please look out for that. And that our next broadcast is on February 28th for Rare Disease Day on narcolepsy and art. And we just can't wait to dive into more about that. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and a huge thanks to our special guest today for sharing with such vulnerability and honesty. I know this topic is, it can be hard to talk about and it's hard to experience. So your willingness to come here and share just means so much, because maybe we can't always make them go away, but there is a lot of power in knowing that we're not alone. Cheesy, I know, but so true. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wish everyone a good rest of their day and a good night's sleep tonight. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.